and so Ceso Troyalia, Nevachiki, Mado, and Kiawachima, and Ansol Martia, and the Jing, Nyawada, Narmene, the teacher, Dunga, Nubadi, Yomares. Then the Chi, Dangan, the Munga, the Jawa Sosolia, meeting by social Nubiki and the Jawa Lagura, or the Nigi, Jaji in Digi, Setizamgi, Ranzulia, Benjorda, Tungenda, the Nigi, and Soso Lula, Nubikiada, and to show the end so Troy and Mado, Shanghai to Yamares, and Kiawachimangas on Chiada, Navalos Chig, Nubayo Mares. Angazuki, Nangi, Mazu, some now Yubi, Nomo said the Jadida, Dick no more Jadida, Jadish, Pemas to Chimbuche, Digi and Sedelina, Sosuke, Lula, Nova, Semna, Nova, Narashin Nigal, Nova Gangatiata, and the Sosuke Tungela, Nova Chitugore, and the Sosuke Cesola Trotugore. And Dimazia, that Dinigi, Numobati, Numobati, and Giwachima, Nasol Martiata, Denma, Nyaval Martiata, Denia Dumanoya, Baudo Mebanoyadi, and Digi, Danganzu, Suzu, Numobiki, Jadiasi, Chigore, just that the Numobati, Tazo Chadi, on the Nishi. And Dimazia, Gisna, and Numobati. Gaoyoresne, and Azuki Kiwa Toma Mebane, Dadibado, and Azuki Numo, but the Yudibaris, and the same meeting to Yujipa Yudiba Chagore. Cesar, Dineza, Digi, and Ekishma, and Azuki Chi Jasedi, Nerap cities and Madocoroina, Shiro de Jamarvada, Korean, Dusuchilina, Sedelina, and Juardoche, and no much of you were no more but just said, Toma Mebane, Dadiba Dusin, Marzula, Nature, Arzulia, and Edgy. To have Mongo, Jures. The new Arzu Numo, but the Nibotin, Maba Meba Masubaina, the no Mombana, the Negidine. And then the Numo Batiki, Marsulia Dungaja in Bares, the names that Numo Pecundi, Dushin, Chi, Sosonga, the Mujasia, the Dang, Nangita, Semi Numo, but Nidify, Yawa Cheche, and the dinner to show that Numo Petadi, she's at the Numo Petadi, tell you Nimbo Tenji, Maba on the Tamidu, some J, Bezucha, Numo Petadi, Pile, Bezucha, or such as kissing on the Denishua.
Good evening. Last week, when we were looking at the continue to look at the fourth chapter of Shantideva's BodhisattvaS way of life, we looked at how in this life, the enemies that we encounter, those such as other humans or animals or unseen beings, they certainly can harm us, and they can harm us physically, they can upset us mentally, and they can, at worst, take our very life, destroy this life. But that is the very capacity that they have, or the limit that they have in terms of how they harm us. The very worst thing they can do to us is take our life. But they cannot harm us beyond this one life. So whilst this is the case for each and every external enemy we've encountered, this is not the case with our inner enemy, these afflictions that abide on our continuum. These have the capacity to harm both our body and our mind, and they can harm us in this life as well as lives to come. And they can harm us in lives to come both in terms of the realm that we may be born in, as well as the suffering experiences encountered there. All of these forms of suffering come about in dependence on our inner enemy, our afflictions. So thinking in this way, we see there really is no comparison between the harm that an outer enemy can do as opposed to our inner enemy. Furthermore, we saw last week in terms of the duration of torment that we can receive from an enemy. An outer enemy, in reality, will only harm us for a short period, some minutes, some hours, some days, some years at most. And the very worst way, and moreover, the very worst way they can harm us is to end or destroy this one life. But afflictions, they have been tormenting us since beginningless time, and there will be no end to their harm that they bring, because their very nature is to cause harm. As long as they abide, and for as long as they have abided, they will cause harm. The harm they cause is not only experienced in the life that the harm is caused, but in lives to come as well. So therefore, in terms of the magnitude of the harm caused as well as the duration, nothing compares to these afflictions. Coming to recognize that there really is no comparison between our outer enemies and our inner enemies. Coming to recognize that, we develop an abiding commitment to abandon our afflictions, to no longer be deceived by them. Continuing in this section within the chapter on conscientiousness, where we're looking at the faults of the afflictions, we will continue now to look at comparison between our outer and inner enemies. So the 33rd verse, when agreeably and respectfully relied upon, everyone responds with helpfulness and happiness. But when relying on the afflictions, they respond with causing suffering and harm.
and denigi tenna se jewa cheba ina sigur denigi tumbi and rimjo che jo cheba ina koron deba de tumba sa de koron deba koron la kare kogina ta ga nyora she de yana and ji guoro ba de ko ne ji digimi de yana ke ngal ji ji digimi se ke koron de tumbi koron deba de tumbi thone koron le 두로 고에나 우유 고거나 로카르지나 코리아 판도체 코로바 제베이나 안에 코로가 되바나신 제 코로바 제제 제베이나 안에 가르치그레스네 안 미디 디스 수술이야 안에 거부차제 tum부차용 거랬어 거부차네 되네 탐제 펜나 된 대제나스 지상 응게디네 수술이야 디스 탐제 수술이야 안에 지게 년도 규르체 수술이야 편바다 대화용이야 판도식에 최고로 와서 그러다 되네 최고로 와서 그래 니도 림도 tumba 림도 된제나 탐제판나 대제나서
The first two lines presents the actual situation with our outer enemies, whether human or animal. So looking at the first line, when agreeably and respectfully relied upon. So in other words, when there's someone that one has conflicts with, again, whether human or animal, if one responds to them in a way that they find agreeable, then, as the second line says, they then their mind will be pacified and they will respond back to us with helpfulness and happiness. So this will be in a situation where someone is perhaps aggressive or speaking or acting in an unkind manner, but we, through recognizing that what they really want is to be happy, not to suffer. Hence they are relating to us in the way they are. Knowing this, we then talk to them in a respectful manner, a polite manner. We act in a way that's in accordance with their wishes. If we know they want or need something, we help them. That will immediately have a positive impact on how they see us and relate to us. And therefore, the way they will now respond to us is with helpfulness and happiness.
denegi chigo dawa de denegi nga suge denegi korona tumbi rimroje kola ro cheba pando cheba ina ansu nga zo nyin du jur tugore nyin du juba na sosolya ane pando chen du tugores de chi dawa de denesi hesaji na nyommo namni denje na chisin dunganyo ba che hesaji 다 nyommo ba se de dene ma re so 다 nyommo ba namni denje ba na se de nyommo ba ki ya de nyommo ba delya ane nyommo ba ki na 델야 님보 마덴제 코롱게 파직 뇽모보다 튠비기 질 레가라 쳬베네 데네 뇽모보디 슈크처셔 줘야다 뇽모보디기 아니 집에네 뇽모보디기 파기엔제네 아니 지게 angazulya 지게 랑 셈마기버 차야 셈마기버 소야 아니 지게 아니 디버사야 디네 용고를 와서 뇽모바 남니 뇽모 남네 덴제나 제가 디니기 뇽모바데 기준에 될야 어디 약보에 섬주 뇽모바 제가 나신 뇽모바디 제수장 내가 제가 뇽모바 둘둘둘둘 그래서 슈크처셔 디게 아니 가지고서는 근데 랑 마기버서야다 셴 마기버서야 아니 뇽모바 온게데 내가 셴레 뇌베다 체외 자와 제진 데네 디바바도 메바사 자고러스 제가 데네 디베사이데 뇽모바디게 데네 가지고서네 네 수 그디나 콜 뇽모바디데 그디나 데 로바체벤 수 판도야 가요 말도 뇌베기에 말도 판도하셔야 돼 균형해야 말해서 뇽모남네 덴제나서 되시오 지금 뇽모남네 덴제나서 직되게.
So this is the case with outer enemies, those that we either have a really fractious relationship with or some minor disagreement. If through recognizing that they want happiness and be free from suffering, we respond in a way that is respectful and agreeable, then our relationship with them will change. Our relationship with them will be transformed. But this is never the case with our inner enemy, with our afflictions. If we act in accordance with with their wishes, the wishes of their afflictions, they just grow bolder and stronger, increase their control or dominance over us. So the case for our inner enemy is the opposite for outer enemies. The third line, but when relying on the afflictions. So relying here means when following their requests, their demands, if we act in accordance with them, they just grow bolder or stronger.
제가 나들이 치 간족이 미나 셈제 간데시나 소솔리아 자오라 진정의 기회에는 델야 야부 섬다 델야 거부진이 지코롱게 되바 나신지 콜 제수 자지 콜리아 야부 제베는 공간중이 뉴투야 도아스 녀는 뉴투야 도아스 뇽모바세디 뇽모바지도 콘트로스 게나 안 콘트로들에 직비 야부라서 야니 콘트로데가 제 마음을 맞기베네 되네 둘둘줘야마도 녀는 주야견에마 자호디 철철 줘야 돼마도 녀는 주야견에 녀 소설이야 판도 차이균이요 말에 와서 그러다든요 대민도서 그러다 제가 이 식당부 되게 지되게 가서 그래 뇽모한테 땡치는 뇽모한테까지 제파 예주변에 델리아 되셔 공로가 아자 간스키베 딜리아 지삼다 비체소전에까지는 직파 제대변에 뇽모바데 슈크처셔 줘야지 아니 게디나 소소로 판도 지겐디 요하기네요 많이 디기 뇽모바 가지 슈크처나 소소 세델에 마키바 차야 돼 되게 마키비 되는 루솔에야 네 디버사야 샬레네야 네 차와 되는 디버사 디데부 동안 용과죠. 그래서 판도야 윤여야요 말해서 뇽모바디 디레해서 올라.
So this is the case that with outer enemies, again with a human or animals, if we fulfill their wishes, act in accordance with their wishes, their mind will be pacified. And in fact, our relationship with them may well be transformed. But if we follow the demands of our afflictions, for example, anger, our afflictions just grow in strength, increasing our suffering, increasing our happiness. So when anger arises, and if we act in accordance with that, our anger only grows. Whereas if someone else an external enemy is angry with us, and we rather act in accordance with their wishes, their anger will dissipate, they will become pacified. So our afflictions respond in the opposite way if we act in accordance with their demands than outer enemies do.
Dene chirjin dunga nyobarchi sade. Chizan chirjin dunga nyobarchi sade. Chizade nyomo badigi nyen gyurchi sosula pandoyage sab gyunayoma pandoya gyunayomaras. Pena ngana zugi dati lada miyu kopan to tueba inayang. Chizan nyomo badigi pa yechi tele nyembo di mababa ina, di nyomo badji sutroba ina, digi larayang ngana zugi tsedele nyomo badigi dipa mangbo saashin. Dene yewa chima nga sol ma chi che nga sungi dunga pato meba yungwa cha gore chi jing se yang gyar se gore yang gyar da den den nyama da nga sol ke na dile thar je da den rol yo ba ina ya nyom ba di wangi an yang gyar ma nga rol ma chi che an dunga an nga rol nyawa ida dun ro da ida da nyawa lo so bi ke den ge dunga pato meba yungwa ya an chi ga so lu da sem ni ba ne ba che ni yang gyar ne ba che ma do han do yu ne 녀몽버들라 같이 땡제 직제베네 판도야 균이 매발에 제자 치르진 동안 녀버지에서 라야마 나솔마티 한동안 빠도 매번 연구해다 녀버지에 강야리에서 마도 판도 균이 말에서.
As we see in the fourth line, they respond with causing suffering and harm. So in other words, if we act in accordance with the demands of our afflictions, yield to their demands, they will only harm us in return. They will only cause our suffering to grow. And they will harm us now and in lifetimes to come. Through the afflictions, we end up being born in the lower realms, as a spirit, as an animal, or even in the hells. And through our afflictions, we create the causes that result in our suffering experiences in lifetimes to come, no matter where we are born. No benefit comes from giving in to the demands of the afflictions. If we follow their demands, we just suffer as a result.
dunrola sosoge nyoba kibai dangan jugi chögi nyamlen thone jetu boina andelia chik no sebo komya ko braya da ane sebo kom delya ane kolya anju nyomo ba kiede nyomo bo wange ta kolya rawa yo mar ningje sembi kolya midelia anji ningje ye da sebo kom baina ane sosora ya ngewa ba to me ba sa ya da ane tarbada tabje kimbo ko bon to yagi gyolo ya sa to yagi gyusa to go ro 제자 니네자 다 냠는 소소 냠는 약고 제투가 섬담면 니네게 소소 네바기 토나 대자 통고 말에 소소의 년도 통고 소소리야 파도지게 소소리야 개와 냠는 제알이야 로지간도 통고로 제산 자워 통고 말와 제산 득수네.
What has been presented thus far in this verse is applicable for everyone. This is the situation for everyone, that the harm that the afflictions do cannot be compared to the harm that outer enemies can do. But there's an additional great difference for those who are practitioners of the Dharma, who are trying to train their mind in accordance with the Dharma. For practitioners of the Dharma, they can respond to outer enemies in a way that would be inappropriate for inner enemies. Towards outer enemies, the practitioner of Dharma will recognize that this being who's acting in an unkind or unskillful or harmful manner towards them, this being only wants to be happy, wants to be free of suffering and pain, but because their mind is dominated by their afflictions, they are acting in this harmful manner. They right now are suffering. And they are creating the causes that will cause them to suffer for lifetimes to come. Recognizing that this mother being before one only wants to be happy, but due to the strength of their afflictions is creating the causes for suffering. Compassion, patience will naturally arise within one. So within the mind of the Dharma practitioner, they will not be experiencing suffering. They will in fact feel a sense of closeness towards this dear suffering being before them. So this is the skillful way that a practitioner of the Dharma can respond to whom would be considered outer enemies.
Kola Sevakomna Yardroya Yomar Kevasa Yomar Dudroya Mato Nanzuli Divasaya Mato and the Gunihama. Just that dinner, then Yomoba said, Dra, when it that Yomoba did or Danju in the Muno the Chi Jazzo, Dawari, Dinganzo Captain, Dawari said, some Dama Danganzo Yomoba, some Dana, Jangwini, the articulated Yomoba, Desha Shetan Timu. Nem Marik Batisu Yomoba Tigeres, Drawon did it. She said, Dineza, that the Dawon when he inviting on the washing go at the Hagoadi, Kechimore, at this young motivation and Gorwada.
But if someone takes such an approach with their inner enemy, their afflictions, only further suffering will follow. Their suffering will be compounded by trying to indulge the demands of the afflictions, because the afflictions will only hurt. They can only cause harm and pain. So recognizing this key difference adds to the clarity that we only have one enemy. Our sole enemy is our afflictions. Outer enemies, if one is skillful, are objects of compassion and care and kindness, but our afflictions, they only cause harm.
And the main big shame as me that the negative control never me last of never get Barsica Ubene, Delia me Sungup Jejo, and the Jiga Niandobata, the negative tone, Sungup Jeje, the Taya Yoroko of Yorova, and the Maze and the Sagittaria, the next Ubene, and so Denmark Dresha, Tartan Bush, and Dajil Drosha, and never get the then a Taya Kok of Yorova. Then you cheat and me to cheat our set, the Taya Kok of Yorova, then the ship Tablamango Yodoro did it, Drag Tablamango. So she get Payaboche, Tumbuche, Chambuse, Ninduria, to area, and Dimen began Dianjik, Sungup that the Nigatone, social dele, never dela Taya Tablam Yoba, dele pa tar rindu chinje, and the pa never Gangatilla, Tayaba Tablamango Yodo. The new Mombe said, you never that. New Momba the Saman Yodova. Also go out on a tire among us called another somebody to use a new modern the kid in the car to work, Governor to work. Can't be now the court deputy Timbus to the Vene, another did the bazar on some dinner in more, but the course of corner large, but it's semi judge, so the jibu. Timbus, the court deputy Vene, that's semi judge the bell corner line, so, yeah, Ganga and the Sungup Katsayobana Kashavana, 2 Guinemerva, says that the new Momba said, and Tao Momadi than your Mombade, so that your Mombadi did it, just that is a new Mobadi, Gedina, Delhi, Tuataya, your mother, Shangi Sungup, Sungup, Tuya Mares, the names are the Karchorasene, new Mombal, Panimbo Tinge, Panimbo Nimbo Gomje, Coliba. Nimbote Gomje, Papa, that Beluche, Zuluche, the Bangores, the Nimboje, Danger, Gomje, Bayadi, so did you do a tablam or did his order.
There are also many different skillful means or methods, rather, many different methods that one can apply to protect ourselves from outer enemies. So, for example, if there are wild animals in your area, in your home, you can close the door and you'll be protected from them. If there are people who are threatening you, you can turn to the authorities, to the police, for protection. So there are many methods by which one can deal with an outer situation, or if the situation in the country deteriorates, one can move elsewhere. So there are many things that can be done. But these methods only apply to outer enemies. They are not at all successful for our inner enemies. Because if we try to gain protection from our afflictions, and we go into our house and close our front door, thinking we're locking away all that harms us, our mind is there, and those problems are still within. If we don't associate with someone thinking, now I'll never have these problems again, our mind hasn't changed. Likewise, if we move country, our mind accompanies us. These methods, the methods that we employ in the world to get away from outer enemies, do not work with the inner enemy. The only method to apply to our inner enemy is to recognize that we should never aid or abet our afflictions, but rather at all times repudiate them through applying antidotes. That we need to develop the diligence to never acquiesce to the demands of the afflictions, but to recognize them as always deceitful and apply antidotes. Not making the mistake that to treat them in the same way as we do outer enemies. Outer enemies, we can run away from them, or we can apply excellent method of relating to them with compassion and patience and kindness and care, and thereby slowly transform our relationship with them. That can be done, and ideally should be done with outer enemies. But with the inner enemies, that is not possible. The antidotes to the afflictions need to be rigorously applied.
Dine zada nga zu nyomo bade tawo yimba de nga zu ha ku ko marwa da nga zu ha ku ko ma ne na nyomo bade tawo yimba de ngo shin go ma de ji zhen de zang de min tawo de de nge tawo re ko nga le ne go se de o de chi lo shan da ji ya shan da ge ne ko tawo re se ma do so su yu li nyomo ba je de kong zhe jie da de sha jie de kong zhe jie de so su ge gang an le song gyup che yin ba sam go ro nga zu ro wa de nga sam de ji kong zhe ge ne so su ge gang a che de gang a de se de na la kong zhe jie da di kong zhe di wang ge ane lu nga bi che da je bu shan ne ba de wei na so su gang a de se zhe go ba da gang a se tu go ba de ne sam man zu nam yu ji da de ne sam yo ro ko go ro wa ji da di go ma de je za de nyom ba zhao ngo ne de nga zu gi sam no na nyom ba cha de ding a zu gi nyom ba zhao yin ba ha mo go ba nga zu kong zhe se de so su ge gang a se ya le so su ge gang a se ya dung se ya le tab lam da yin ba ro chi ngo zin je chang zu bi ji da ya da so su ge de cha da de so nen so su ge de da zhu bie le ya tab lam ji yin ba zhe chi bi ji da je bi ji dang ge ma de di gyuan yin ba da no zhu yin ba ha go tu ge ba nga zu de ne yin za da ge se chi wa la chen bi o du nyom ba de chi nga zu le ne ba jian de zhang wen ne di ma re de so ni du gyu ya yo nga zu ge tab lam ji ni du gyu ya de so la de ne nga zu jam ni ji ko me da so bi ni men ja da chok sa ji jiang ge wa ba tu me ba sa tu ye yo so so ni na shi re zhang wen ne de ma re zhang wen ne de zang zu nyom ba de re nyom ba de ga ji pa ji we je den bei ne dur zhe ma da ya zhe ya kin ne pa do kin ne ma le je za da nyom ba de ga wa yo sang nga zu sen ben na lo yo nga zu ga wa tu na di nyom de yo de ge je za di nga zu nya wa dang ko dungal ma ji hen di nyom ba de ji go re je za da nga den zhe go ba top dan ya den ni ma ya ja ma nya wa ma ti chi gen de nyom ba de ji go zhang wen ne de nyom ba de re je za da ko zhao yin ba ngo xin ba ji ha go ba ji ko gyun cha sa ha go ne ha go wa che nan de le ya nya bo dian je be zhe je nyum be ji dian je ko de bang ho nyom ba de me ba so bang ho re je za da nyom ba du pa we na so so ra na di ge yang ya ge tab lam da ya shui de di re so song go da di da na ji nyum bo di song go re
Through this presentation, it's abundantly clear that our sole enemy abides within. It's these afflictions. But despite having heard this many times, one is not yet well acquainted to this. We still point to others as the source of unhappiness, whether others being other beings or whether situations, point to them as being the source of unhappiness. This then leads us to withdraw from others, at the very least emotionally separate from them. But what's unskillful here is that despite having some knowledge, we haven't integrated that yet, so we haven't truly recognized that the source of our problem is not a particular situation or what someone is doing or saying, but rather it's our emotional response to that. This afflicted response, this emotional response, that is the source of our suffering. So this needs to be recognized. And to recognize this takes extensive reflection. Afterwards, when the mind's calmer, looking back at a particular situation and seeing that what was said or done was not the cause of our suffering, it was our afflicted response. And we need to do this, go through this process again and again, coming to recognize ever more clearly that it's our afflictions and our afflictions alone that cause our suffering. And then as we become much more skilled in our training, we will then be able to respond through our training, no matter what situation we encounter or what others do or say towards us. And our training will then lead our mind to staying patient, in other words, undisturbed in the face of this adversity, because compassion is arising within us, a sense of care for this unhappy person. And because compassion is dominating our mind stays patient, undisturbed by this potential adversity. And then we can utilize our wisdom, our intelligence, and we can make a wise decision as to how to respond, what to do. It may well be to back away from the situation or to apologize, but we'll be able to think clearly without being overwhelmed by our afflictions, our emotions. But this takes repeated effort, training, to come to recognize that in all circumstances, it's our afflictions that we should blame and not others. That others cannot cause us the harm that the afflictions do. Even if others do physically harm us, that harm is very temporary, whereas our afflictions cause us to suffer now and in lives to come. So these two general components, the one of recognizing that it's the afflictions that cause us to suffer, not others, and then secondly, the training in how to respond skillfully, these we need to engage in repeatedly over a sustained period. So this becomes our habitual response. This then is how we can be skillful in dealing with life's challenges and transforming them into opportunities to be of benefit to others.
Debaji Pashi, Midigi Melena, Melena, Tinlamsa Korn Lumdingor, Kornai, Sosugi Debati Madubati, Sosugi Debati Melena, Kornaya, and the Kornai Gorua. Jeza, and Pejodi Debati Maduyagi, the new Delia, and Genjuro, the Shukshe, the Dilkon Shukshe Langroa. Jeza, Tangazugi, Jezanga do so Kornakas Langos, Sosugi Debata, Sosugi Tawadi, Shandati Melena, did a meeting by Chair doing Kornlangidoa. Jezadi Karji Kornas, Kornadi, Sosugi Debata, Tawa, Sungip J, Dorda, Denegate, Kornlangor, D. Sungip J, 2 organized, Kornland, the Durdram, the Pandosio Mara. Jeza Denegate as a Kornganis language, simple social Kornland had by Shimju J, Bendigo. Chisnis, the corners lavena, Jedua, the teaching a Corcasi corn lava, somebody, Ting AD, middle young AD Jeroch, Loco came Malenche, Ting A Sheva Nation Quajic, the Cameledi, now corn lava research. That you and A. Deba, the Cook came by now corn long lie, doing it, Jumzen Demba Reveson, Jumzen Demba Marwan, and a Carsure, Sosuki Debana, Mijanda, Debana Jiba Chayo Marwada. benim kozu kuyu diyor böyle şey manyanda 아니 말 콩라네 큐 가르신 콩라 큐 되버딩 이 두고 가요 말어 와서 비 파딘 레그와 안디 나신 출리 되네람나 제가 콩라 사고 비 김세 가 매질래 콩라 사고로 와 제가 간주 두시네 그런 게 소수게 되바다 따와 튜바데 켈링 거야기 아니 그런 되바 차고로 와메도 켈링 거 인지미지 요 말어 와 제자디 되네 인자 소수게 약보 통배네 파줘되게 약보매와 통그래 파줘되게 약보 통배네 나도 약매와 통그로 와다 제가 되네자 나도 약매와 통배네 그런 파줘되게 약보 통그래 제가 소소라는 게 삼을 통나를 지 여러와 되네자 소수게 따와데 마틴디 따와데 마틴 바디 파줘되게 따와 소수게 되바디 케 밀렘바나 야나 케 소수게 되바디를 균주 제바다 되네게 따와데 미든 벌아이는 아주 코르게 용도 와데 제가 코르게 제자디 코르게디 되네게 네 기용을 제가 디기 돈다도 sometimes 코르게 돼 소수게 다 인육도 소수게 따와디 다 미튼 바제도 코르라 용도 제자디 김제 삼단에 소수게 나이 삼바디 파초디 킬링 거 거비 김제 가요 말어 와다 오늘 저와다 제가 그런 되바리네 네 칼라 디사위 켜 칼라 디마선 디기 말았는데 코라는 아주 너르르 와다 제자디 아주 두스는 삼다베네 코르 사고 비 김제를 차고 말이다 두스는 삼다 이내다 아주 되니게 람사 되니게 삼다 투고 말람사 소수 다와도 되바데 미팅 받지 람사 콘라 용으로 하다 가서 제가 두신 콘라에게 삼단하디 두삼단은 딜링 거래 제가 디아 소수 다와들 소수기 다와데 약벌은 히디 약벌서 소수기 착바 다와들 차바 차되제 제가 착바체 착바 디 원기 다디 된다 마두디 콘라 거래 제가 착베 원기 콘라세 착바 디아 삼단 두신 삼단베나 가르슬리오스는 nga seba nga rang che sin nga rang che ba zin ba rang da tu zin ba zin da zin zo de le den le yong ro wa che sa din ne sa da nga zo gyu zo da zin ma ri ba re snyo mo ba zo da zin ma ri ba re che sa din ne sa da zin ma ri ba ni nyen bo dian che da me ba to pe ke da me ba to chi nyen bo di ko ba na da zin ma ri ba ne din ne de le din ne an de sha ma ke ba ko ra ke ma ke ba de yong ro ye sa da zo nyo mo ba 녀모베 규조와 다시 말이 바래 제자데 규조와 될 님부터한테 다음에 봐도 베셔라 동동방이 또 베셔라 돼서 때도 숨어로다
So when you recognize that afflictions arose in relation to a situation or a person, then what I encourage you to do is later in that day to sit quietly and investigate what happened. Especially sit down when your mind has calmed a bit, when you're not overwhelmed by emotion, and reflect on what happened. And ask yourself, why did I get angry? And here immediately recall what Shantideva has presented, that the source of our suffering is not external, it is internal. So there's no need to go around what they said or what they did. This is not important. Watch what happened inside. And you'll recognize that independent on them doing or saying something, from your side, there was an emotional response. Afflictions arose. And that was the experience of suffering. That was where their suffering arose. So why did one respond in that way? This is now where we need to look. We don't need to investigate, why did they say that? What was their motivation? This isn't important. Our mind is our responsibility. This is where the source of our suffering and the source of our happiness lies. This is where we need to look. So whatever it is that they did or said, we'll recognize, firstly, that we suffered because of our way of thinking. And why was our way of thinking afflicted? And this comes down to just this point. This person said or did something that was not in accordance with my wishes. That's all. They perhaps spoke in a way I didn't like. That wasn't in accordance with my wishes. Or they did something that I disapproved of. That's not in accordance with my wishes. Or they expressed a view or an opinion that's not in accordance with mine. That's all. And from that, all these emotions erupted within. If they had said or done something that was in accordance with my wishes, I would have felt closer to them. We would have been in harmony. But merely because my wishes were not being fulfilled, all of this inner turmoil came about. So now we are recognizing the source of our response. Someone else, hearing those same words that the other person expressed or seeing that same activity, may have a very different response than we did. So it's not about what they said or did, but it's about whether it was in accordance with our wishes or not. So this is an important recognition, because when we see that all that upset me was that someone acted or said something that wasn't in accordance with my view at this particular time, that's not something of such great importance. Because we have many disagreements over things of no great importance, and certainly when there's a passage of time and we look back to what we got upset about, if we can remember it, it's not so important. This can help to calm the mind already. Furthermore, if we see that we expressed our upset, expressed our anger, this almost certainly made things worse. Perhaps the best we could hope for is that we intimidated the other person to say nothing more. But that is hardly a desired outcome. So here we are striving to look or to see this sequence of how we came to be unhappy, how we came to be unafflicted. When we recognize that all it is, or all it comes from, is someone doing something contrary to my wishes, we can calm down and relax. Because that is not a big deal. People are not required to have the same views or opinions as myself, or act in a way that I like depending on my mood. So we calm down, see it as something that is not a big deal. Then moreover then we need to go quite a lot deeper to see a deeper sequence of what went wrong. So we see that anger arose, and that anger came from attachment to a particular view or opinion, that we may value a certain type of physical behavior or way of speaking or tone or choice of words, whatever it may be. So from this attachment not being fulfilled, anger came. So due to my attachment not being fulfilled, I got angry. So we've seen part of our sequence, anger from attachment. But this attachment, it came from the ignorance of self-grasping. Due to my attachment not being fulfilled, I got angry. Just a sec. So then we look a little deeper we look for the I. We see, so who is this I, or where is this I that whose wishes were not fulfilled? Where is this I that got angry? And in this way, we now come to reflect on emptiness. And this then is very beneficial. This will make the mind much calmer and will aid us so that in the future we'll come closer to the point when others act in a way that's not in accordance with our wishes, to immediately checking ourselves by realizing them having a different opinion than me, it's not a big deal. The world's full of people who have different views. I can calm down. It's not worth getting angry towards a mother being. So immediately we can be calmer. And even in the moment, we can ask ourselves, who is this person getting angry? And where is this person getting angry at? So through this process of reflection, and doing it again and again, one will become skilled in dealing with one's own mind.
Adine dedar yunding en gyuncha jar gyurba nebe chora pewi gyujikbo dagi nila nge par ne chana cover jigme cover kala jurus.
Moving to the 34th verse. Thus, this perpetual and continuous enemy, the sole cause for the great increase of all that harms, if it establishes a definite residence in my heart, how can I be unafraid and joyful in samsara?
Ana nyomo be gyen mango chigore, Tedar said the Shian to Tao Nangi Nyomo, but Sigore, Tedar Digicon Shevan Ashin, Tedars, Union, Yun Cha, Tarjuba, the Kuko Toma Meban, Chicken Gula, Union Good and a nation, Yun Chache, Gunchi, Mutune. Dusian Anzula nature, Anzulia nature, Targuba, Anzulia, never, no, Rana, Shana, no, Rasha, never Dusian, Gunchaja Rangula, Semneva, Dusian, near your escorta.
So this verse starts with the word thus. So this shows we continuing in this section where we look contemplating the faults of the afflictions. And we see here in the first line, thus this perpetual and continuous enemy, this enemy being the afflictions that perpetually or only harms us and has been doing so continuously. This is our sole relationship with the afflictions.
Nebe so said the dance so nege setele nea sechimale nea rashin nigala dunga jegi nebiki gin mangbu jia ya gombedo ya shuk chersha dangor nebe so rappels the pa gun pa nebe shu chersha dangor benere konrasa andira ko sanye konresa konre yane yanzu de konre diwange lunga ge dene jeba dugja te gin ro ra dunga ya yu neba ne Rachel never get dig gains in the moment. Nason like Geshe Thubten Rabten, just again, Nubi, Ranshingi, La Nubiki, Gin, Sauce, again, Mambu sauce, Mambu sauce. This is Mambu de Pa, Jig, Ya, Marmada, Nubo Combe, the one you're going to pay Tangore, Tangore, the Numo Patiki, and similar nation.
In the first line, we recognize this enemy, our afflictions. It perpetually, in other words, it only causes harm. There's never a positive result from afflictions, and that they continuously, since beginningless time, have been harming us, and they will continue to do so as long as they abide within. Now the second line, they are the sole cause. This is our sole enemy. It's only due to this one cause that there is this great increase of all that harms. So as we remain or become ever more afflicted, our harm just increases. And it harms, so this word all refers to the wide variety of harms, all follow from this single cause. There's one cause, but a wide variety of harms or sufferings that follow from this one cause.
Denigi Daniel begin you so pewa chicken you chibu, the Yomo Bachiburi, so that Yomo body, that Yomo body mother shan or Mares or that Carso and Anzulia, Kiawachima, Nason Kia, Nason Kiwi, Nasolia, Duman Yongoegi, Chazan, the Yomo be Gucci, Yomo be Gucci Balatina Yungores. It's not said in a society, same Makibacha, Lul, Shan Rachel, Novaki, the Gangate, Yomo Betendigo, Chazan, Yomo be good, Yomo Bachiburi, Chazada, Ansonda, Koyu Dunga Chaza, Yongo, Dunga Yongo, Gangate, Guchibuda, Yomo begins in the Yongore, such a Dusine, the Guchipu, said the Yomo Batisoro.
This term then, the sole cause, this emphasizes this point that has come up again and again. There's only one cause for our suffering. It's just these afflictions. It's nothing but the afflictions that cause us to suffer. Every unwanted experience, no matter how slight or intense, that we've had in this life comes from our afflictions. And in every life that is still to come, all the suffering we experience, whether in the lower realms or the higher realms, comes from this one cause, these afflictions.
The Nigi Yomo body in the Gao Yores and Dagi Nilang Apple Nechanas. 제산 녀모바 세디 소수기 닝라 지파 내찬의 무투시 내도열에서 or 내도열에서 닝래 내도열에서 다 닝세데 지당 닝세들 고에 몽고여로 땅아 저기 지수번나게 닝세야지 닝세야지요. 양저 조세야돼 고거래. 안지 되니기 안지 되니 고거래. 이내 다디디 닝세야들 아 저기 류심니게 나네 셈로 고거래. 제자다 다기 되니기 녀모바 라신 니가게 동아 빠도 몇 녀아지 녀모바데 가와요래. 랑기 류치로요 나로요선 류나로요레스 류나로요바는 수불요레 가와요레선 조 셈레 되요레스 닝기 조다 셈 바네 되요 셈나가 내려요레스 셈레 무티시 녀바 네 차나스 네세디 네 차스 예세디 셈제 디데도 안나 셈데도 녀모바데 셈나나 요데브레스 다기 닝라 녀바 네 차나스 제자 디네자 단네 아데 안도 나보디 손샤디가
Having recognized that our afflictions are the sole cause of all our suffering that has been causing us to suffer perpetually and continuously, the third line then identifies where the afflictions abide. They're not outside of us, but are within, at our heart. So this term heart can mean the physical heart, or it can mean primarily or main. So here it means that in terms of where do the afflictions abide, is it in the outer or the inner? Well, it's the inner. So is it this somewhere within the body or within the mind? So here we should think of it within the mind. Or you could say the mind, which is based at the center of the body, so here near the heart. So this is where our afflictions are to be found. But the main point that's being made is that the place where our afflictions abide are within our own mind.
Korvi jime kawar kala gyurus. Chesada sem nalo yobaza nyomobadi nyemboje mabamba ine dini nyomobadi range sem nalo yobaza digi dai ji nyomobadi ki nyomobonke ji le sa le de khowar ma ki korvi dunga nyonggo jibadi le tharayo mares khowe jiba meba chayo mares nyomobadi meba. Chesa dini zada sosugi dewadan gawa gyurese yoayo mares. 가와 beneda nyomobadi nyomobangida nyomobaki nyomobadi range semle yoyobaje dele nyomobati nyomobadi shashaba nyomobadi wange kor ma kor kowale tarya yoma kowale kor kowe dunga an지 nyonggo nyong야다 빠트메바 nyong야다 데니스 nyongje kowe jibadele tar투야 요 말에 제사다 가와단 되와서 요야 가요 말에서 요투 말에서 그래.
If it establishes a definite residence in my heart, so this third line then identifies that they're abiding within our mind. So as long as they abide within our mind, now the fourth line, how can I be unafraid and joyful in samsara? So in other words, as long as we have afflictions in our mind, we are bound in samsara. It's these very afflictions that bind us in samsara. So as long as they are within our heart, we will be bound in samsara, which means we are always in danger of falling into the lower realms, where our suffering will be intense, where our situation will be helpless. We will not be able to improve our situation. So how can we be unafraid? How can we be joyful, taking pleasure in the various delights of this human existence, when we are still bound in samsara, when we will still continue to suffer?
Andini zada korwi dunga korwi jikpa dunga kangata ane chiki di kwanzulu kukuyo mar dile tar kukuyo anzulya ane chiki dina lusim lula devotan semla kawa lusim kadi kukuyo chisan di yonga ya nyomo balpa sem nyomo ba choso madangwa che ane pa dena denpa dan shi shingi den che ba yu den ane sem gewe choso pa dang che ne gewe chawa nyamlen che dang ane chiki nyomo bala nyembo den che ane chiki nyembo den nyomo bata bawa ina dine kowe jibale targire ane yang lusim gade diya 용토그레스 오라도는 인보다 되네 인자 아줄이야 뇽모베 괜디도 소삼다 뇽모베 괜디도 통다 자원원에도 뇽모버레샤 아세베다 디야 안 가와도스나 소수게 세마나로도 제사 사마나로 여바 인자다 신디 파파야리아 메바소야리아 안딩이 바예데 셈케비 뇽모버 쳐서 마당와지 게비 쳐서 때 당전에 될리아 안지 류가이스 예체도 수림송위게 시做出什送于团呢？安迪阿里大面吧，都被年波电检年波把帮给上面专注这些别注些，第二年波帮完了专注些的年们结果嘞，第二这边呢，可谓基本来塔图嘞，安尼然后旅行调改的定义，改的点图嘞，这个都送过来的呢。
The meaning here then is identifying firstly that our sole enemy is our afflictions, and these afflictions abide solely within us, or only within us, within our own mind. This is where our attention should be. Our attention should be not on the various happenings in the outer world, but what is happening within our own mind. So even when we are going about our activities, we need to be mindful of our own mind, so that we are on guard with vigilant introspection and taking care with our mindfulness, and always also relying on conscientiousness. In this way, we can be confident that we will be ethical. It's through restraining our mind ethically, restraining it from coming under the influence of the afflictions, that we can have confidence that we will notice the afflictions as they arise and skillfully apply antidotes. For this then to come about, our focus needs to be on our own mind, not primarily on the outer happenings in this world, but on our own mind, and through relying on the combination of conscientiousness, mindfulness, and introspection, ensure that our mind is restrained by these virtuous qualities, and therefore we can apply antidotes successfully.
자, 되게 당한도 지체 니디 가르송고 상한들이 녀모비 교인들이 되네 용고래 제사도 쓰는 녀모비 교인들이 용고 제체 제사다 녀모비 교인들이 녀모바세디 먼저 자고做的 녀모바래 제사다 녀모비 교인 가려여래서네 녀모바디기 파 아는 안들 가지 진텔에 녀모마데 메지 녀모비 초수 줘봐는 둘둘줘야마도 아니 야줘야 기네요 말에 디기 당한 저기 다당한도 된줄 톱되어 있네 녀모바데 녀모마데 메샤샤바 있나 아니 녀모바디 견전에 야제 망아솔마 예제 동아바도면 용거 차기래 제사 녀모바를 녀모 땡고래 녀모데 메바서고래 해서지 중국어로 다 지진이바디기나 다가라 녀모바데가 가와 열어서는 아주 심리야 무티시 선날에 네바 네데요 제사 녀모바들 녀모디 마바바에 그디네 녀모바디 견지 견가서 강아요 규긴 망보 시우지 견망보 용하디 지금 누바 견망보 용하다 디데리아 누바 차시 다디 녀모바디 지고래 제사디 녀모바디 그디나 아주 심날로야 유에데 바래 디네 인자 다디 마방 봐도 아주 코발에 탈투야요 말에 코발에 마타바이나 네 루심디기 용해야 돼 갈래 가보래스 디네 인자 다 녀모바들이야 교인들이 통화지 하고 와제 녀모바 모여서 교인들 통 제사다 녀모바를 봐 디마방 탑민도 선비게 나 배주체 녀모바 야 방에 배주체 거래 제사다 도시네 심 당보관 심 바위에 녀모바 초소마도 바위에 안제 시신이 안제电解把有的给什么给予说当，安这样啊这个他，当我当啊这个就另外一说你决定别出这么的呀，我说你是说为他呢，但那啊这个这个大面包对比接不接大面包对写了过面。过面了，说都是那样，这个年前的牛毛把的帮过我的也是，现在的牛毛别个找我做的啊，就牛毛把的气找我写的啊，这几天的气找我写的怕，去找我是来过的呢，找我那的马的是，现在的找我那的牛毛把的，这样七罗有嘛，南罗啊，就什么哪里有的，啊，就搞好出来，啊，就你们的也有把的，现在的第什的。녀모베 자고 셈딩 아주 삼로 땅지 교와 땅지 될 녀보된 소수게 삼로 튼 교와 땅지 매바 세월 마다 현수 탑시가요 말에 제가 두시네 녀보된 공부를 해서 송거로다
The two verses we've looked at tonight then builds on this particular section in conscientiousness where we are contemplating the many faults of the afflictions, where in these two verses and the few before this, we saw how the afflictions have destroyed our freedom. We are enslaved by them, and that they harm us in limitless ways, causing us to suffer in limitless ways and for an infinite period of time. Moreover, we've seen tonight how that we should never indulge their afflictions, never act in accordance with their deception. We should ensure that we do not succumb to believing that happiness will follow this time if I follow my afflictions, if I follow my attachments, if I follow my anger. No longer be deceived by the afflictions in this way. And as we've seen now in this verse, that it is our afflictions that create our samsaric existence, we need to recognize them as our sole enemy and no longer be deceived by them. Now we need to rely on the friends of the meditator, particular conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, the theme of this chapter, will aid us by ensuring that we are not deceived by the afflictions, not believe by following them happiness will come, and not believe that our enemies are outside of us, but are actually only within. And together with mindfulness and vigilant introspection, so these three, conscientiousness, mindfulness, and vigilance, we can take care of, at the very least, our physical behavior and our speech, but ideally, we should be taking care of our mind, ensuring it does not come under the influence of the afflictions. Then, moreover, when we are going about our activities, whether alone or with others, be aware of our mind. And when we notice our mind is criticizing others, blaming others, complaining about others, turn our attention from them by recognizing they are not our enemy. This mind that is complaining, that is criticizing, that is blaming, that is the enemy. And rather, turn your mind inward, away from these trivial matters outside of one, and apply antidotes to one's mind. Make it virtuous once again.
Bas ngotre nangor chis and the meaning around Zugita, Nyomoba said, Samla Tango Marwa, Nyomoba Sam Tango Mar, and Yamno Sam Mata, Nyomobi Kuan Garkaris, Nyomobi Kuan Tago Marwa, Kuan by some Kuan Garu, some Matane, Kuan Tongo Mare, Kuan Matona, and Di Ma Delia Ponduga, somebody, Ligo Marwa. Cesana to that part to see Nyomobi Kuan Yapo Maton, Cesan Maton as a Nyomo Pondugi, Nimboti Matimpare. Tarwa, Nimo Matembaza, Nyomo Badi, Mapamache, and Dusino Corridor. Cesar Dine is other young to Nyomo Badi Pa, Dusine, and Nyomo Badi, Dinishin, Nyomo Badi, Mueso, the Nyomo Bequindi Pa, some time, Nyomo Badievana, the Tevukari Yungudu, and DJ around the kind of new, Shalla got a new good. She said that the Nyomo Baketa, the kind of ski you do, you gonna see the key do. She said that the nigga do, she sometimes that in your mom, but it does how order, or that that I have put in the Russian nigga Dunga Mato, Pandos out in us. She said, no more by the Yosaka dos. She did also some Nala, some Nala Yedi Pareza, that he by did that some Lutanchen, got Nyambo Tenche, some Nutoni Banco at the Resha, and that the nigga, no more big Gun Tong. Gun Yane Yado Da, Gun Shimjuchi, Gun Tong, that did the Bango to send bigger, Bandu, then you do by the Shuchimbochi, Pashi, Ligisarwa. The niggas that the niggas that do by Nemo by the Bango to send bigger, then you do much labana, then buy Nimboti la Bezin Chegi, and then Bezin J. Morwa, the Bezin Javaina, and then Zugi. Chignomo Chung died, and Yamboti, Ya, compared to Trotu as Yungorva. Then the names that make Yesivala Champion Anzulia, that Nangbi, Che, Yamachasa, Dirwata, Yomo, but Dinania, Rangi Sem to a tap, but Timba Yanjarwa, the Chesa, the nigger some Dutch assembly, but Lue Thubten Rabten Jewore. So the Nanying Bodaga, Yomobi, Gun in the Gun, Yomoba, Udin Shong, the Yomo in the detail in the Shongu, then Yomoba, Gun did the Ranchin, you didn't Undu as Gun to get some down, Dusin some dango race or that Shimjuche, and Yomoba de Gawa do sit so some now Yoba, so some number down, didn't got some Gilla down when it Yomoba in by the Hako to it is other. Yeah, how could you do that? Diba, Delia, Yambo Denje. Bendigo, Bendigo, basis in Bendigo, Bangories. In a Java and the Danzuki, Dengi, Tako, and draw 2 good as such that the new word is was Chazalaya, Yamnachi.
So, over the last few weeks, we've been looking at a number of verses, maybe starting in the as I remember, maybe in the late 20s, 28 or so, we started to look at the faults of the afflictions. So this is these teachings are useful to go over again and again because we have very little habituation to recognizing our afflictions as faults. This is why we can spend so much time thinking and talking about the faults of others, the faults of situations. As opposed to recognizing what's causing us our suffering is how we respond to what others have said or done or a particular situation. And it's by transforming our mind that we will not suffer from those same words, actions, or situations. So this is where we need to put our focus, recognizing how we are enslaved by the afflictions presented in the 28th verse thereafter, how they present limitless suffering. And then we saw last time also about how they cause us to suffer for a limitless period. And then tonight we saw how if we indulge them, our habituation to them will only grow. So this way we've come to recognize many faults with the afflictions, and also the last verse, how we are enslaved by them. So I encourage you to reflect on this again and again, learn these faults and go over them in your mind repeatedly. Because this is the basis that we need to then be able to skillfully rely on conscientiousness, mindfulness, and introspection, to be able to, firstly, have the discipline to recognize, to be mindful of our mind, to be aware of our mind, and then, when we see the afflictions, to not follow them, even when following them is what, because we are so habituated to it, it seems comfortable. It seems like the right thing, but we need to recognize that if I follow my attachment again, if I follow my anger again, it will be the same result as every single time thus far. And I'll compound my ignorance, I'll compound my suffering, I'll compound my delusion. So this this habituation we need to gain in quiet times such as now and at home, but keep it fresh and alive in our mind when we're going about our daily activities. Because we need to challenge this belief that following our afflictions is okay. This time it may be different, or this isn't such a big deal, I can follow my desires. So we need to apply ourselves with diligence here, because what we are looking at in this section is the very heart of Buddhism. Because the very heart of Buddhism is about subduing or taming our own mind. It's through progressing towards gaining liberation from our own afflictions that we start to become a person that can be of real benefit, a real positive impact on the lives of others. So to bring about this welcome change, where we start to loosen the hold the afflictions have on us, we need to recognize them as being our sole enemy, the sole cause that leads to all harm, all the variety of sufferings in this life and lives to come from these afflictions. They have harmed us perpetually and continuously, and come to develop a deep aversion to their presence within, so that we can have the strength of mind to rely on conscientiousness, mindfulness, and introspection.
당시 삼론당상의 개발지 시고여되어 배는 저기 여름지 송시 휴디급리아 배 되서 창업에 깔래고 중되어 충주지 매는 마도 창업되도 한 삼나라야 미 송주 주야다 차상 야고 고고르스 베시 펜베 삼로시 끼르여자 안델리아 강아스 가요 말와 같이 되면은 그 파셔들가 뉴구도 켜파로스 뒤파슈세지 지겨마 가지나 소스나 빼지 부수도 뭐지 되게 지 배수지 되거로 파셔도 만여야 삼 배수지거로 와디 삼로나래 소수기 개위 삼로시 펜베 삼로시 유에디베 갑린자 강아가티고 말에 돼서 총주 상할 다디네 매비 갑로 소소라나 강바 침부지나 두시는 직부 되디걸 치료디와 계지 겨베나 남서 가진 계기고 남서 돌아랑서 삼로디 강부 침부다 소직마도 요말데 이내 치료디 계데스 겨나 남성 혼라데 계기고도 직료고도 세데 지도 혼라디 티로 디가 삼문나야 셴레 펜베 삼바다 안지 개위 삼로디 매디 안 삼로디 남사 딜리 홀 개위 삼로다 펜베 삼로 여바이나 소소레드에서 자하드 깔레 하보도스나 오다 콜는 딩어 콜레르시는 아직 되시나 디디우 삼베게다 삼다에도 삼로디 야고여도 되니 강아 소고 말까지 소소 상하 잡지 부스고여다 딩아 저기 세월을 지냐면 연구도 하대.
If you think of times in the past when you've had the great fortune to receive teachings directly from His Holiness, in particular if you were in India or Nepal, where in the teaching environment you squeeze together with very little space to move. There are people all around you, many of them you don't know, and you really packed together and you squeezed into the space probably for some hours. And yet, despite the physical discomfort, we not just endured it, but we are quite joyous because this was a wonderful occasion, and our mind was thrilled when we saw His Holiness come in. We could hear His voice directly. Now, when we're sitting in our home with plenty of space, we can stretch out, we can stand up, we can move around with freedom, unlike when we're in those packed environments. Just an unpleasant sound from outside, and what happens to our mind? Immediately unhappy. We hear talking when we want quiet. We hear machinery when we don't like that particular sound. And what happens? We get angry. How's this person destroying my peace of mind? They're not being considerate of my needs. And this is just following our afflictions again, our habitual way of responding. But I encourage you to train in the way that's presented, because nothing here is beyond your capacity. Train your mind to recognize when others are acting or speaking in a way that you find unpleasant. Just remind yourself they are expressing their wish for happiness. They're expressing their wish to be free of suffering. And by reminding yourself of that, your mind should calm. So I encourage you to take these teachings and apply them to your heart, because you will be much happier and more positive impacts on others too. So thank you. Then we can conclude therefore for tonight. But if you have questions, then please feel free to ask. Then thank you. Thank you.